Uncle Bill's Dream, adapted by Robin Moore. Well, I'm not a superstitious man, but there's some things that a lot of folks call superstitions, which is just as true as anything you can see in the daylight. Now, you take witches, for instance. No use telling me there ain't none. Why, I've been rode by 'em plenty of times. One night, my wife and I were asleep in our bed in our cabin up along Little Pine Creek. In my dream, I heard somebody calling my name. So I sat up and I looked out the window, and there in the front yard was the prettiest looking girl I ever seen. She was motioning for me to come out and join her. Well, I didn't waste any time. I didn't even put on my shoes. I just walked out there in my white nightshirt. And there, in the moonlight, I could see she was wearing spurs on her boots. And she had a brand new bridle in her hand. She reaches out, grabs me by the forelock, and shouts out, "Mixty Moxty!" Next thing I know, I'm standing there on 4 legs, with a tail, long ears. Darned if she hadn't turned me into a donkey. Well, before I could even say hee-haw, she slaps that bridle into my mouth, leaps on my back, and digs them spurs into my side. Well, I didn't need any more encouragement. I took off like a house afire. She rode me hard for several miles, and it weren't no easy trail, neither. She took me down hills, across streams, through briar patches and thorns. Finally, we comes into a clearing, and we met up with a dozen little fellas. They were, I don't know, maybe about 3 feet tall, each one of them carrying a sack just overflowing with gold coins. Now, I figured maybe they was bank robbers. That witchy woman, she climbed down, and darned if they didn't load them heavy bags of gold right on my back. Oh, well, they led me up into the trees till we come to a cave underneath a cliff, and that witchy woman tied me up to a white oak sapling about as big around as a woman's ankle. They unloaded them bags and stowed them in the cave. Well, that witchy woman hops back on my back, rode me like a brush fire back to the front yard, turns me into a human, and sends me to bed. Well, when I woke up the next morning, I was feeling pretty low. I was briar scratched all over, and my arm and leg muscles were sore from running all night. I told my wife what happened, and she was sure I'd just been out sleepwalking, so she laughed and she doctored my cuts. But darned if I didn't have that same dream the next night and for 5 more nights after it. And each morning I woke up just lacerated and tired out. My wife, she tried to help me. She tried to loop a piece of rope around my wrist and tie me down to the bedpost, but it didn't do no good. My dream body just went off and got all scratched up just the same. Then, I got an idea. I thought, maybe I'm having this dream for a reason. Maybe it's because I was meant to go out there and find that cave in the daylight and get that gold. So on the 7th night, I hatched myself a plan. I laid down on my bed and I fell asleep, and I waited for that witchy woman. Well, there she was, a-calling my name. I joined her out in the front yard, and she grabs me, yells out, "Mixty Moxty!" Next thing I know, we're tearing down that trail. But this time, I'm smart. I stops every now and then. I raises my donkey tail, and I lets drop a little dropping, just to mark the spot. I knew next day, all I'd have to do is go out there and follow them droppings right up to the cave. Well, we met up with them little men like we did before, and they got me loaded up and got me up there, and she tied me to that sapling. All the while, I'm just grinning like a donkey. And then, donkeys, they have pretty good teeth. I looked down there, I seen that sapling. I decided I was going to mark that spot extra well. And I reached down and I just started to gnaw away at the bark. And I was just gnawing and chewing as hard as I could. And then all at once, I hear my wife. I hear her yelling. I thought, What's she doing in this dream? Next thing I know, I wake up and there I am, sitting up in bed, chewing on my wife's leg. And not only that, I had made a terrible mess of them bed sheets.